the Pilates Bridge Live Show. Today we're talking about teaching about creating profit with purpose as a Pilates studio owner. So you love teaching and creating impact, but building a truly profitable studio can feel like an uphill climb. When every hour depends on you, your cash flow might feel unpredictable and you can start feeling burnout. And today we're going to talk specifically about how to build a profitable Pilates studio, even if your business model is focused on private and small group training. You can have a purpose, profit, and peace without selling out on feeling like you have to add countless large group classes to your offerings. I'm talking to Amanda Vernor. She's the founder and owner of Soma Space Pilates and Gyrotonic Studio in Austin, Texas. She's built a successful studio with a thriving culture founded on her principles, lineage-based training, and deep understanding of studio operations and business strategy. She also provides consulting to Pilates studio owners and boutique wellness studios and professionals about how to build profitable business without sacrificing the integrity of their work. So, Amanda, welcome to the Pilates Bridge Live Show. So excited to have you here. And just to get started, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your Pilates story, when you started your studio, what brought you to Pilates and opening your studio, and where you're right now? What are you doing?
Thank you so much for the warm introduction. I'm so happy to be here. So I originally was a yoga teacher. I went through training in 2002, and at the time I was writing full time. I was working in advertising as a copywriter and teaching on the side. So typically before work, sometimes during the lunch hour, and then also in the evening. So my life was very busy. It was a very full-time job for me to do both of those, have both of those jobs in that career. I eventually switched over to teaching Pilates when I moved to Austin from Los Angeles because I just felt like, Pilates wasn't quite on the radar like it is today, certainly. And there was a lot of yoga in Austin. So I went through training and opened my studio in 2009 and focused entirely on Pilates in the beginning. At the time in Austin, there were only a handful of Pilates studios. I opened with a very low threshold of risk. I had a home-based studio, and so I had my mortgage, and then I was able to teach out of my home, which was great. So things, of course, have changed significantly since then. I've also added the modality of gyrotonic to my studio in 2010. It's been 16 years now. It's been a crazy and beautifully rewarding journey for me. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Awesome. Yeah, so the topic of our webinar today, of our live show, is we're talking about profitability with purpose. And this is definitely something that you've built, something that's ingrained in your business model, in your studio culture. So what does that mean to you? What does it mean to build profitable business while maintaining your purpose?
Yes. So that's such a big question. I think I want to go back a little bit to the history of how I started my studio with that in mind. Because when I first opened my studio, of course, I was at home in a detached studio space in my backyard. I had a full-time job still, making a good salary. And I didn't feel like I didn't think about profit. It was a service offering. It felt like it was coming from the heart. It was my passion. And it really wasn't until I left that first career and took on my first commercial space where I had that, oh my gosh, moment of, not only do I need to earn money for my personal expenses, but I also have these business expenses. And sometimes that there's a feeling of desperation whenever you get into what I consider to be like the higher risk business ownership of having a lease and other overhead expenses, is how do I cover both myself and this business, much less growth? I mean, that's just almost a tertiary mindset piece. And so we often forego profit because we're just trying to make ends meet. And what I have learned is that profit is stability. It's the cushion. It allows you to sustain your mission and your purpose. It gives you more room to be purposeful and intentional in the way that you run your business. I feel like when we aren't thinking about profit, we're often doing, moving or working beyond our personal and professional boundaries in order to make it happen, to cover the bills and to meet the demand that we inevitably, ideally would have as a business owner. And so I think profit means stability. I think it means sustainability, and but it has a negative connotation still. I think many of us come into this, this career from that place of passion and wanting to be of service, and it feels dirty or selfish, or even the antithesis of being in a service mindset to earn more than only what is needed to cover expenses. So I've just learned that in order to protect or to preserve the integrity of what my studio offers, that the business has to support itself and then a little more so that I can reinvest. And even today as a coach, because I do work with other studio owners on a very limited basis right now, my primary work with them is to stop seeing profit as a dirty word. And often most of them come to me already I need to figure out the profit part because it's just not quite working. And instead start seeing it as a structural form of self-respect.
Yeah. And I think it's very important because if you have, like you mentioned, the profit, it gives you stability. And then when you have the stability, again, like it makes it so much easier to make decisions as a business owner without chasing all the trends, without having to run yourself into burnout or trying to figure things out. You can make decisions that are based on what you believe is right, what is your purpose of serving the clients, instead of just trying to follow along and do what everybody else is doing, even if in your heart you don't feel like that's the right thing for you or for your clients.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's maybe where the hiccups sometimes is that initial acceptance of profit as something that is necessary in order to sustain your purpose and your passion. But you also don't want to tip too far in the balance where you're not thinking about the integrity of the work that you're offering or the service that you're offering, because profit becomes more important. And I like to think that that's a delicate dance that we all will experience on a personal level as entrepreneurs and business owners.
So do you advise, like when you coach studio owners, do you advise that they write out their mission, their purpose statement, or something that they would hold true to while they're setting up or working on their profit?
Absolutely. Yes. I think it's not always the first thing that I do. Many of the clients that I work with have done a little bit of that work in the past. We refine it. And I also work with a lot of studios that are pretty similar to mine. They tend to be a classically trained studio focused primarily in private offerings or gyrotonic studios. And so we're all working with a limited body of repertoire or work. And so there's a natural integrity that's already in place just due to the approach to these methods that we have. But I think allowing that to seep into our mission, vision, and values statements is really important. And it is the desire to uphold our mission, vision, and values that I think is another reason why profit is so important. And of course, when I speak about profit, I'm talking about pricing, of course, but it's also expenses, so overhead, and payroll. And inevitably, when you're talking about payroll, you're also talking about culture. So all of these things are they're all linked, and it's almost impossible to write a mission, vision, and values statements, or to even look at pricing without looking at all of these elements, because they really need to talk to one another. They are a cohesive and symbiotic relationship that make up the success of any business, studios included.
So I know you mentioned that your studio is primarily built on privates and semi-privates, and this a
Mhm.
lot of the studios that I work with, a lot of the questions that I hear from my community of the Pilates studio owners, that's the primary business model. However, with this kind of business model, one of the issues is that there's a limited number of hours that you can devote to your teaching. Especially some teachers are solo teachers and studio owners, which makes it even more difficult. Some do have other instructors. But how, I guess like it's a large question, but like, how can you make a private and semi-private based studio profitable? Like, do you have any specific tips you can share?
I would say the primary consideration would be that under no circumstances should a service-based business, and especially a private-based studio, set their rates based on what their competitors are charging. I think that is probably still the most common way to price services in our industry, and it is without a doubt the most damning way to do it. There is, even in a city like Austin, which is a bustling and growing mid-sized city. I think we're at about 1 million people in our last census report. Even in a city like Austin, my downtown studio rent and overhead is considerable compared to somebody who is in a suburb, or someone who is just outside the central Austin area. And so if I were to base not only my prices, but also my payroll on what someone 3.5 miles away from me is charging, I wouldn't even be about profitability. I don't even know if I could keep my doors open. And so I think, in a private-based business in particular, you by looking at pricing from the perspective of your own expenses, the expenses that your studio has, is the first consideration for pricing. Of course, then we get into payroll and we look at overhead, and there's all kinds of individual approaches to those as well, but it still has to be based on what your own business can afford. And I will say that, again, in a city like Austin, I think where I live is a great microcosm of the issues for private studios around the world, which is that it feels unsustainable because we aren't looking at pricing from that perspective. We're looking at it from, well, if this studio is charging this, how can I charge so much more? There's no way clients will come to me. They don't know the difference between me and them. And we're also competing with group class studios that are primarily group class based, which naturally the margins on a group class are more forgivable than in a private setting. But again, we can't compete with that. Of course, this is just opening up a whole rabbit hole around the integrity of the work, because again, typically the classical Pilates method is a private space system, and not a group-based system. And so in maintaining our desire to, pass the torch or to hold the legacy of the classical work, we stay private spaced. And if we're staying private spaced, we must look at our own expenses when we're calculating pricing.
And well, actually, do you have any specific tools or resources that you can recommend or share specifically about how to calculate the profits?
Yes, I do. I have one tool that I shared with people who are all of you out there that are viewing this this live or this recording with Anastasia and I. It is a payroll profit calculator, and this is a simple tool that, and there are a million different ways that you can calculate this, but essentially we're looking at what your monthly gross revenue is, and we are calculating your operating expenses and overhead and your payroll, and we're looking at each of those as percentages of revenue. I think a very traditional way of looking at business profitability or even just expense breakdown is that if you have revenue as 100% of what you're bringing in, that 30% of that goes to your payroll, 30% goes to your overhead, 30% goes to profit, and then you have this extra 10% that could be padded or maybe just left in the account for toward additional profit. It could go kind of in any of those three buckets. What tends to happen in a private space studio is that we put that extra 10% in payroll, which is still in a healthy margin for us. So I think that this calculator that I have, and any number of versions out there that are similar to that, is a great first step for anyone who has a private space studio to look at where is your revenue going. If your payroll expenses are over 50%, that's going to put a very tight squeeze on how much money you have left over at the end of each month. You couple that with a high rent or high expenses for any other reason, then you're really in dangerous territory. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is preserve as much profit as possible. We want to pay our people fairly, and we want to set ourselves up for success by reining in expenses that are unnecessary, or choosing a rent that won't hamstring you in the long run. So that would be my first approach for anyone in a private space business, is to look at the breakdown of where the revenue is going.
So a question, I actually saw that earlier. If the studio understands that they need to change pricing, right? So they use your calculator, which I dropped the link in the comments, also going to be in the description of the video as well for anybody who wants to use it. They already have a set structure of how much they're paying their instructors. And they're realizing that the payroll is already high. Let's say it's 50% and up that they're paying their instructors. So at that point, should they lower what they're paying their instructors, or just go up on the prices? So somebody's going to be upset, the clients or the instructors, right? Everybody's always
there's no
upset.
Happy answer here.
Yeah. What would be your advice on something like that, especially if it's going to be, if you need to considerably increase the price based on that payroll number already that they're paying out?
It's a great question, and it's the absolute most important question that I answer with any client that I work with, and it is the very basis, the very foundation of everything that I do in my own studio, which is it's all individual, of course. Let me just give an example. If I'm working with a studio owner who's brand new to me, and they come in and we do these calculations, and we find that their payroll is at 55% of revenue, which is not uncommon. Often by the time someone comes to work with me, not only is the payroll well over 50%, but they are usually in a negative profit margin. They may be, running close to break even, and maybe they're at 3% profit, or maybe they're under negative 3%. But I have also seen cases of people being 50 and 65% negative in profit. And it's a deep, deep hole to dig out of. And always the first place I look is pricing. Because the last thing we ever want to do is impact our team. Our team is the lifeblood of any organization, especially a service-based business. In our types of studios, in a private space studio, gyrotonic studio, or Pilates, our team is typically very specifically and highly trained. They've made significant financial and time investments into their careers, and we want them to be compensated for that. So I look at pricing first, and usually pricing is off. Incrementally, those pricing adjustments can be made to the client base. I have different specific strategies depending on the studio and their I would say maybe their approach or their skepticism around changing pricing. We often will roll out new pricing to new clients first, so there's not a history of what has been paid to the studio. And then we roll out pricing accordingly to kind of the easiest all the way down to the most difficult people to convert. The process of rolling out a new pricing structure is usually pretty stressful for a studio owner and also for the front desk team, or for teachers, however the studio is structured for administrative work like that, and requires support, requires typically some sort of sales training, and often a lot of mindset work around what it means to be a service-based business. I feel like one of the most important mindset shifts that I try to communicate with clients is that our work is a value exchange, or that the business of service-based offerings is a value exchange. My hour of expert level training, let's just say in Pilates or gyrotonic, is not worth less than a client's money. And so it can't be that the client's money is more valuable than the service being provided. And I think it's the nature of our profession that we have, and I forgive for saying if this comes off kind of harshly, but I think that sometimes there's a perception that our industry isn't a professional industry, that it is one made up of side gigs and freelancers, and kind of like how I started, where it was like something I did before work and after work, and that it wasn't my main job. It wasn't enough to make a living. And the perpetuation of that as the way the job is done has either had an impact in the teacher's mind of the value of what they're providing, or it has an impact in the client's mind of what the service is truly valued at. And so those pricing conversations are typically, that's why they're difficult, because we have to shift the way the client is thinking about the value of the work, and we have to shift the way the front desk person or the instructor is framing the value of their work.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big issue for many instructors. I know, like you said, and for me it was the same. It's Pilates, teaching Pilates, coming into the Pilates industry comes from the passion. You fall in love with it, you love it, you want to do something on the side. I've met a lot of Pilates teachers who always treated it, and even studio owners who treated it more like as a hobby rather than a business, which a lot of times that does not lead to anything good for the business. Unfortunately, it never translates to profitability or sustainability in the business. And that's definitely a big mindset for them to break through. So when a studio owner understands that, okay, it's time to raise the prices, and right now we're also dealing with this economy of the large group class-based studios showing up everywhere. And again, that's a different business model. We're not saying that it's bad or not. It's just, if this is not what you as a Pilates studio owner want to do, this is not your purpose, this is not your service that you're providing. In this case, how do you differentiate? Because the prices over this private, semi-private truly boutique studio are going to be way higher than anything that others are going to provide, or maybe even other private studios, but where again, like the instructor or the teacher is just not really looking at the studio as a business, but treating it as something like a hobby that they want to do on the side. So their pricing's definitely not going to reflect that as well, and it does in a lot of sense.
Yeah.
At times.
Yes. Yes, all of that is, that's all of that is very true. And I would say, it's impossible and, unrealistic to compare the services of a private space studio with a group fitness studio. You just have to look at it like it's not a competitor. I think that the specialization for a private studio, the specialization in classical Pilates, the specialization in the gyrotonic method, means that you recognize and accept that you're not going to appeal to everyone. The depth of these methods attracts the right people. It will take longer, but generally, the people you do attract stay longer also. They're willing to pay more. So this gets a little bit into the culture of a studio where it's so easy to adjust the makeup of your team or adjust your pay rates or adjust the pricing that you put out to clients because you want to be in the conversation with clients that are also looking at these other studios, but you can't. You have to trust what you're putting out there. You have to trust what you stand for, and you have to stand for it, I would say firmly, like a tree. You sway in the wind, but you don't break. Like you recognize when there are market shifts. There's stuff going on right now. The economy is a little more erratic. Consumer spending has tightened considerably. It's expected to continue tightening. All of these things give us pause, because not only is that happening, but we're also seeing that what we consider competitors they're more affordable for a customer. What comes into play when you're thinking about all of those variables is that, without a doubt, you absolutely must have your expenses and your payroll and your pricing lined up with your specific situation. It has to match what you're paying in payroll. It has to match what you're paying in rent and other expenses. If it's not, that misalignment is going to continue to happen, and you're going to continue to try to jump into the same ring as these other studios that they're just not your competition. And your clients clients who come to studios like ours want that one-on-one private attention. They want to understand the depth of the work. They're not looking for a trend. They're looking for a studio and a method that's built to last. And I think as long as we remember why we were attracted to these methods, or this type of method, this niche in the first place, the more we stay connected to that, the stronger we will be as business owners. And it'll be easier to weather these types of market fluctuations.
Do you think that there's like a specific demographic of people who are more attracted to this private niche specialized kind of training, or do you think like it kind of covers different generations, different interests, and everything like that?
I think it covers all generations. I think if there's one demographic consideration where there is a discrepancy, it might be in total household income, naturally. But I think sometimes we have new clients coming in from all generations, who have experienced a group fitness studio, a group Pilates, a reformer studio type setting, and then learned that it was actually rooted in this other thing, this classical approach, and they want to know more. But not everybody is going to be in that camp. But generally, those who are attracted to a studio, to a private space studio, they will have more disposable income. They typically are, I would say in my ads, I run ads to 35 plus. I don't actively target a younger demographic, only because a smaller percentage of them would have the disposable income in order to convert. A lot of studios can get some of those clients in on an intro, but they can't. The adjustment from an intro per session rate to a long-term package is just a little too great for them to afford on a regular basis.
And this is just, for me, interesting question, because I deal with this all the time in marketing. So you mentioned that you're running ads, obviously, and you have an established studio. Like, what platform of ads has been the most successful for you, or most, I guess, lucrative, and not really, brought the most leads? Here you go.
Yes. So, it's interesting you say that, because I have had an evergreen Google paid search campaign going for over 10 years. I started with paid search ads on Google in the very, very beginning, and had the privilege of being able to work with someone at Google to set mine up. So I've had connection with this same group of people from the get-go to make adjustments as needed. So I've had a successful run with that. I just recently looked at switching over more formally, and diverting more of my budget over to Meta. Not necessarily because of the demographics, but because I feel like the search, I am not a marketing person any longer, even though that was my first career. This is purely instinct. And not based on any actual research data right now. But I feel like I'm lost in the paid search world right now. When I look at my results, my conversion rate on paid search ads right now, I see that it's hard to compete in the reformer Pilates space. It's hard to compete even in the online video space. And we're just a little too specialized for that right now. And so I'm in a quiet period for ads. But I'm working on how I'm going to approach the new year. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it's just always interesting just to know, because advertising, it fluctuates, the tendencies, and that's something that I've been seeing as well, like with Google ads, especially for the private focus studios. It's been really expensive to run those ads, and usually the campaigns that perform better are the ones that were established long term ago, because there's something about the history of the campaign that helps it work better. Whereas if a studio is just starting to run ads right now, it takes way longer to build up all the data and momentum, because all those ad platforms, they're building of the conversions and everything that's been set up. So the longer the campaign's been running, probably the more optimized and better it's going to work for you. Whereas if it's something that's just brand new, in most cases, it's not going to have as much impact. And yes, it is expensive, and it takes a lot.
It is. And I will say too, I have historically had, my ad budget is a fraction of what is standard. I have at the most at times had maybe 3% of my overall revenue as my ad budget. I'm usually way, way, way low. I spend very little money on advertising. And I think the reason why I ended up pulling this evergreen campaign most recently is because I had whittled it down to, I think I had 3 exact match search terms, and I had hundreds of negative. And I thought, I mean, it's so specialized now that unless someone types in this very specific string of words, I don't show up. And so I just shifted to organic search, just
Mm-hmm.
tried to bolster that more and let that do the work and save that few $100s a month that I had been spending. Um, I, this is of course just one of the millions of things that any studio owner is thinking about
Yeah.
at one time. And it's always in an effort to improve the quality of the leads that we get in the studio, because it's hard on a studio owner, it's hard on a front desk team, and even a teaching staff to have churn, to have new clients come in that aren't well qualified for the studio for the final pricing that they'll move into. We want anyone walking into the studio or reaching out to the studio to be very well qualified from the get-go. And so our ads and our organic search and our websites have to do a lot of heavy lifting for that to happen.
Yeah, I think
It's really not a place to waste money.
yeah, I agree. I think like again, I come from it obviously from my experience with what I do, but like I do see a lot more return on the organic search, like building that foundation. And not to say that currently it's, I mean, I know we're kind of diverting a little bit from the topic, but right now the Google business profile for a lot of studios is like the primary source of leads. And there's been a lot of changes in how Google presents those searches. And there's some talk, a proof of that, it might be that in the future, certain elements of those Google business profiles are not going to be available or visible, like call buttons and things like that. That's already starting to happen for certain industries, unless you're paying for the ad for that call button to show up. It hasn't affected Pilates or like boutique wellness studios whatsoever, as far as I've seen in any of the results. However, there are some other industries where that has started happening. Definitely more competitive than what we're in, and just something for everyone to be prepared for. Just set yourself up as right now for the best they can, and then because in the future it might be that certain of those elements you'll have to pay for anyway.
Yeah, well, that's just incredible, and it's just another reason why you just can't be too careful with your
Yeah.
expenditures. Breaking down and understanding where ad dollars are going is so important, because that is frequently I see it in my coaching work when we're doing an OpEx spreadsheet and we're writing down all the expenses, that there are evergreen ad campaigns out there that really aren't producing that well. They haven't checked in on in 6-8 months, and it's X amount of money per month, and they also happen to be bringing in unqualified leads. So then it's a drain on all studio resources as well.
Yeah, definitely just keep that in check. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Because you don't want to give anybody your money, your hard-earned money.
No, you need to keep it for that.
Keep
Probably
it for
payroll.
yourself.
You got to cover that payroll.
So I know we're talking about specialization, and specifically you talked a lot about building culture in your studio. So what does it mean for you? What kind of culture did you build at your studio, and how did it contribute to you building your successful studio?
Well, to be honest, it hasn't always been easy or great. I mean, I think figuring out how to work with a team of people is a very challenging element for a lot of studio owners. Most studio owners are pretty type A personalities. I know I am. I am also extremely motivated and driven and fairly disciplined as well. And so there's when we're learning how to manage a team, which is inevitably that's part of how culture is created, that you are wrestling with elements of your personality and even your work ethic, and having to find common ground with multiple people who aren't studio owners and may not have quite the same drive that you have. And so culture, I believe, starts really with what you model. And what I have gotten really clear on, especially the last few years, is that it's not just what I say, it's not what I put in our employee handbook, and it's not what I talk about when we have meetings as a team, excuse me, but it's also what I do and how I am in the studio. So let me just give an example with client interactions. I feel very strongly about the integrity of the work that we offer in my studio. We're a training center for both Pilates and the gyrotonic method. And so I feel that we are held to a higher standard than other studios for that reason. That is self-prescribed. I don't know that the public sees us that way, and it doesn't even matter. I hold us to this high standard. And so I don't allow, as a classical studio, I don't allow a lot of deviation from the material that is taught in our training program, outside of what special populations might need. And so culture around integrity, I would say that our studio culture around the integrity of the work is modeled after how I teach. Because I say that it is this way, and this is the way I want it to be, I have to show that in my actions. And that's a top-down thing. It's a trickle down from the leadership, me, down to even our apprentices. So that is partially where culture starts. It also has an impact on boundaries. As an example, I think cancellations late cancellation policy is a really great place to build a culture of respect, mutual respect for teacher and for client. There is a very rare exception when we forgive a late cancel for a client. And the reason for that is because we pay our teachers for that time, and we want the client to understand how important the teacher's time is. It kind of goes back to that side gig, freelance teacher, and the professionalism of our culture, that we reinforce that with our team and with our clients. But I think that even if you don't have a team and you're a solopreneur or a solo teacher working out of your home or even out of a small space, that you can create culture through your policies, how you present yourself, and the consistency in which you show up. So in my studio, it shows up in how we teach. We maintain the integrity of these methods. We don't really adulterate the work. We reinforce our culture with the way we communicate with each other as colleagues, and also how we invite clients into our space. I have tried to create a culture in my studio that clients are guests, and this is our home. And so, not all clients are a good fit for us. And over the years, we have had to let clients go who weren't respectful of our culture. Sometimes that looks like a client coming in and asking to do an exercise that they learned at this other studio that isn't in our repertoire. And sometimes it looks like our cancellation policy. And sometimes it looks like just a personality that comes in that isn't quite congruent with us. And so that's how I look at culture in a studio environment.
Yeah, that's great. I know for you it translates a lot into teachers, and I'm sure it helps you to work with the same teachers, keep the same staff on board for longer periods of time, because they feel like it's a professional environment. It's a job, it's a career. It's not something that they can do on the side when they have a couple of free hours here and there.
Yes, and I think, the more clear I have gotten with how I want the studio culture to be perceived, and really what it comes down to is that the culture needs to match how I feel too. Inevitably, a studio owner is the foundation of the culture of the business in the studio. And so if you are trying to create a culture that is slightly off from how you actually feel and how you actually want to be perceived, then it's not it won't be congruent. You'll have issues. And I've had that where I've been just a tick off from how I really feel, and I haven't been able to maintain the team that I want to have, or I've had to let people go, or people have left on my team. I've also learned a lot from it. I've made mistakes with existing team members, and but I have been rewarded at this point because I have a fantastic team. We are increasingly careful with who we bring on board. Everybody has to be in agreement, because the culture is so solid and so deep right now, and we all want to protect it. And that's a great feeling as a studio owner, to know that you have a team that's bought into it. It feels like it's not just mine, and that takes a lot of pressure off.
Yeah. Does it make it easier for you when having that culture, the team, to leave the studio, or go on vacation or take a break?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm busier than I've ever been because of my teacher training schedule, particularly in the gyrotonic side, and the couple of days a week that I do coach other studio owners. I'm in the studio less now than I have been in the past, and I feel so exceptionally supported by my team and my studio manager, and I love that it can be theirs when I'm not there. I love the subculture that they are and that they maintain whenever I'm not there, and that they can make that a little bit of theirs too, because there's this incredible mutual trust that we have. And it's
Yeah.
taken a long time. So if you're listening to this and it just seems like a pipe dream, it's really not, but it just takes time. And I've evolved. I wasn't always easy to work for, and that was on me. I had work to do. So
Yeah, there's always something that we can learn and improve on, and it's always a process. It
always a
always is,
process.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's so great if you're starting out, to have somebody who can guide you along in that and just help you go through some of those steps a little faster, or with a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
guidance, so you don't have to figure it out on your own all
Yeah.
the time, right? This is what, like, the
Yeah.
idea of having a mentor, having a coach for yourself, like as a studio owner. Like, you don't have to do it all by yourself and
Mm-mm.
bump into all these things and figure out how all these things work. You can ask for guidance, and it makes it so much easier.
It does. And I think too, something I've learned, and this is a more recent learning, is that it's for me, it has not ever been one person. I think in the past, I have been a part of masterminds and coaching groups for many, many years now. And I have in the past made the mistake of using that coach or that group of coaches as the one source. And what I have found is that I have, I have a, it's almost like a psychological or like a spiritual mentor, who is also a Pilates studio owner. And she owns a big studio, multiple locations, and she drives the internal work that I have to do as a leader and as a human. And then I have my financial coach, and this is a coach that keeps that profit mindset really sharp for me. And so and it's hard to find one person who can do it all. And I'm not always 100% or 50-50 equal on my spiritual or, the soft side of being a leader. And I'm not always 100% on being, the super financially focused studio owner either. I need both of those presence. I need that presence of both of those types of people in my life as mentors in order to be the most successful I can. And I'm sure it'll change. So maybe there's a third person I need to, who's to say.
Yeah, it's you're never finished, right?
You're never finished. Hopefully you're always growing.
Yes, that's the idea. It's and I can also say, like, from the studio owners that I worked with, which I've worked with them for over 10 years now, I've seen the most growth in their business model from the studio owners who always participate in some kind of mentorship. Maybe not always, but at some point they started working with mentors, or even if it's just like a mastermind of other colleagues that they can work and grow together with, or coaches. They are the ones that I see grow and really flourish in the business. And the ones, again, unfortunately, the ones who are trying to do it all on their own, it's a very heavy burden to carry.
Yes, it
It's a
is.
very lonely road and a heavy burden.
It is, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because I do have this third mentor, and it's this group of women that I meet with twice a week, and many of them are, maybe if they're not watching, I know they're going to watch the recording. And we are, it is like the singular most important development of my professional life, that I have fallen into this group of women this past year or so. And we're in different parts of the world, and we're all in different stages of our career as far as studio ownership or coaching or some combination. And feeling alone is real. It's so easy to, as an entrepreneur, really in any space, but I think especially a space as unique and as challenging as boutique fitness, you have to be in community. So I'm lucky to have that. I want that for all of my colleagues. I want that for my competitors. Even, I want everyone to feel like they've got their people around them that understand them, that they can go to. I try to provide that for my clients, but even for my coaching clients, I want them to have their own community of people. And yes, so you're right. It's not just mentors, it's also colleagues, and it's got to be someone other than your husband, your sister, your wife, your mom,
Yeah.
although those are all great too. You've got to have someone who you can nerd out with on why this software migration is going sideways, whatever it might be, someone who wants to listen and understands.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important. So I want to bring out like a couple of questions
Sure.
that were submitted, and one of them we haven't touched on it, so I really want to bring it up. There was a question from Ang. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So the question is like, curious to know if you have utilized online options to support your clients, especially as a private-based niche studio.
It's a great question, and I have a few different approaches to that. So one is, yes, for our privates, we still offer virtuals. That is something we offered very little prior to COVID. Of course, we really ramped it up during COVID, and then we still have some clients that we've never met in person that we still have as virtual. So from a virtual perspective, live private appointment, we still offer that now, even when clients are traveling out of town, going on vacation. Rather than them canceling that private session, we ask if they want to meet us online. So that is one offering. There's also the digital library. We have, over the course of the last few years, we've had a digital library, more informally, something that we would share with clients if they needed to late cancel because they were sick, but they wanted to get a workout, but they wanted to do it on their own time, then we could send them a video. We are now actively building out a more formal video library, not only for clients, but also for our apprenticeships in gyrotonic and Pilates methods. And I do believe that, especially for a private space studio, any opportunity we have to increase revenue without increasing payroll, particularly, and of course overhead, we should do it. So the answer to that is, I'm working on it now, and you should too. Anything that you can offer digitally is going to improve your net profit. Oftentimes, after you have the initial expense of getting the content recorded, edited, mixed, color, whatever level of professionalism you're going to go with your videos, The minute you start selling those, you recoup your expenses very quickly, and then it is just more of a passive income source, which is a popular buzzword, but it's popular for a reason. It's because it's important, and it typically doesn't tighten expenses.
Okay, and then I guess it'll be interesting to touch base with you in about a year
Yeah.
after you have the time to build it
Yes.
out and
Yes.
see. So
Give
are
me
you
6
planning?
months.
Yeah. So are you planning on introducing it only to your clients or expanding outside of your local or virtual client base?
It's a good question. We will have client element, we'll have client sessions that are open broadly beyond our client base. It'll be just part of a subscription service video offering that we have, digital library that we have. And then for the apprentices, I have offered these free of charge as part of apprenticeship at Soma Space. But we will be eventually offering those for professionals as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be a little further out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and always something to work on.
Yes.
I have another question from Celeste. How to maximize clients who are doing privates and refuse to do duets? I have to work limited hours, so I need to maximize privates as my clients refuse to join duets. How do I manage this to be financially successful?
Well, I think looking at pricing and making sure that your pricing incorporates what you want to earn yourself as a studio owner or as a teacher. If you're a freelance teacher, you still have to look at what you would want an annual salary to be for yourself. And I like to think of that as a way of reverse engineering where your pricing should go. If you know how much it costs for you to rent a space, or to run a space, if you have overhead, whether you have a home studio or not, if you know what you need to make at the end of the year, let's say, then you make those calculations and you reverse engineer it back, and that tells you what you need to make on an hourly basis. That ensures that if you, let's just say that you're, for even numbers purposes, let's say that you're charging $100 for a private, that $30 of that is your profit if you're a solo, if you're just a freelance teacher, and also the other 30% for payroll. So you could be making upwards of 60% of that in total as a freelance teacher, but your prices have to have that factored in. So now to get to the other part of the question about, let's say your pricing is all right, but you still have more demand than you can actually service. And in order to accommodate more clients, you need to move them to duets. First, look at pricing, make sure every person you're seeing is paying the dollar that you need to make for that hour. If they refuse to move into duets, you have to look at your pricing. You have to look at, are you charging that person enough to take up a single hour that you can make no other money on? Inevitably, a client who wants a private session and refuses a duet is going to need to stay a private client, whether they stay with you or not. I think you just need to make sure your pricing is where it needs to be so that you feel like the hour is worthwhile for you financially.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And that is one of the challenges. It's kind of an immovable challenge of the private space studio, is that if you were on your own, or if the demand for your time is so great that you can't squeeze anyone else in, you must be charging enough to make it worth your while.
Yeah, because once the price goes up high enough, people will become definitely more open to the idea of a duet if they want to work with you.
Right. Or they get angry and they leave,
Or they
but
just, and they leave and then.
And again, that's where that, you have to feel like what you're providing is worth it. You have to feel like the salary you want to pay yourself is what you want. You have to believe in what you're doing, and what you're putting out there price wise, for sure. But that's a tough one, and we've had that too. I think every studio runs into supply and demand issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hope
So
that's
there's
helpful.
another question. It's kind of similar to the duets, but like
Mhm.
from a slightly different perspective from Lynn. And I'm thinking of making all privates into duets to up my margins. The idea is they pay for 6 months, ahead. If they can't make it, we can see if there's a free spot during a week to complete. Otherwise, they lose it. Bad idea?
Well, I know Len. um, and I love her. And she's brilliant, and it's a great idea. What she's basically describing here is a kind of a strict membership model. And I think it is smart. Will clients go for it? Again, it comes down to the culture and the boundaries that you put in place as a studio. If you have, and I know, as I know she does, and so many other studio owners have, is if you have a limited number of spots available on your schedule or another teacher's schedule, and the demand is so great, most clients, if they value what you're providing, will make it happen. So, do I think it's too strict? No. Will all clients go for it? Probably not. Will the right clients go for it? Yes. And so, this is what I was saying at the beginning of our call, too. It's hard to answer any one question without touching on every single element
Mm-hmm.
that makes up a business, because this goes down to, is it a qualified lead? Can they really afford your services? Are you paying yourself what you need to be paying yourself? Is that salary reflected in your pay, in your pricing? Because not all clients will go for it, but I think so. Yes, we just updated our memberships to no expiration for a 12-month membership and full rollover, but they have to use it within 1 year and no suspension. So, like, we're tightening, we're giving some flexibility, we're tightening other things. We're going to see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I would say experiment, see how the conversations go.
Yeah, I
Smart.
think experimentation is always a thing. There's no, like you said, there's
Mm-hmm.
never just a set
There's never a
answer
set.
to
Yeah.
anything. There are always so many variables
Yes.
that go into it, and what works this year might not work 5 years from now, or might have not worked 5 years ago at the same time, because there's a time element of where people are, where the economy is at, what's
Totally.
going
So
on
many variables.
around us. There's so many different things. It's not just, okay, this is just set in stone, and if you do it, you're going to be successful just like that.
And you think about the type of client. Like, for Lynn, with this would be, pick the kind client, the one who adores you and gets and feels so much value from your services. Ask that client, offer this service or that setup to that client, and see what they say. Start with the nice clients first, and feel free to do something custom for someone, if needed. We do all kinds of custom stuff that is, we just keep it in our pocket. It's not what's published. Yeah.
And that's probably also another element of a very specialized private-based studio, that in ways like you have a little bit more flexibility to provide that custom concierge style
Yeah.
service for their
Yeah.
needs. Well, I know we're coming up on the end. We actually came up to the end of our hour here. I'm going to ask you just one last question just to finish our conversation. So for someone who's just starting to think strategically about their profits, about building their studio, what's one clarity habit that they could implement this week? Just start with right away.
For a new studio.
Not necessarily, just somebody who just starting to think, okay, I need to figure out this whole like profit thing. I'm ready. I just need to do something.
I think take advantage of the complimentary calculator, because the title of it has payroll in it, but it also includes your operating expenses. Plug in your gross revenue, your operating expenses, and your payroll, and just see where you stand. I think knowing the percentages of where your revenue is going will automatically direct your focus. I have this calculator set up with information depending on where you land in the payroll spectrum. But if you see that your operating expenses are half of your revenue, then you know that you need to look at your expenses as well. So that would be my clarity habit for this week, is track your numbers, because it's impossible to understand what you don't measure.
Absolutely. Yes, totally agree. And for everybody who wants to stay in touch with you, keep learning from you, where can they connect with you?
Sure. My website is balancedstatestudio.com, and I'm also on social media with the same handle. My studio is Soma Space, and I also have the Gyrotonic Austin Central Studio. Any of those three profiles, you can find me. I'm happy to have a conversation with any and everyone. If not only to give you just one little piece of advice, would be to just start tracking your numbers and reach out to me or any number of wonderful coaches that specialize in this industry, and get the help that you need, get the support that you need.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for all the wisdom that you shared, all the tips, advice. It was, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, our time together, and I'm wishing you all the best luck with all your, like, your studio, your coaching, and this new online offering that you're bringing in.
Thank you so much, Anastasiya. It was such a pleasure.